In one of the most dangerous neighborhoods of Rio de Janeiro, in the very heart of Brazil, a young woman named Floridélis dos Santos de Souza managed to become an influential figure. She was a pastor, singer, politician, and the mother of over 50 children. Performing on the streets, she attracted the attention not only of ordinary residents but also of high-ranking politicians. Floridélis shared her story of love, faith, and redemption with people, promising care and support to her followers. Actively managing her social media presence, she claimed that her path was chosen by God Himself. But soon her name became associated with sensational scandals, corruption, questionable intimate relationships, and even murder. This is the story of the fall of the evangelical empire of a woman who was once called the Mother of the Nation. Floridélis was born on February 5, 1961. Her father was an artist and musician, while her mother took care of children from the local community, in what resembled a small home daycare. The family lived in one of the largest favelas of Rio de Janeiro. For those who have ever seen films about Rio with its bright, chaotically arranged houses, these neighborhoods may seem exotic, but for residents, life there was extremely difficult. Favelas are places inhabited by the poorest segments of the population. Houses were often built on unstable foundations, without proper maintenance, and gradually fell into disrepair. It was almost impossible to find reliable water supply or proper sewage systems, making residents vulnerable to infections and sanitary problems. Nevertheless, over 10 million Brazilians continue to call the favelas their home. When Floridélis was a teenager, the residents of her neighborhood were barely making ends meet. Yet despite the hardships, the local community remained close-knit. Families supported one another, associations were formed to address common problems, and schools and medical centers were built. However, many of these institutions soon fell into decline due to the spread of drugs and the country's unstable political situation. Gradually, the favelas became hubs of criminal activity. At the same time, missionaries and preachers began to arrive, bringing hope through religion. It was amidst the chaos and danger that followers of the World Pentecostal movement found their audience. Floridélis's parents embraced Christianity and joined a Pentecostal church known as the Assembly of God. They took their faith seriously, and Floridélis's father even began holding prayer meetings at their home. The Pentecostal Church is one of the most charismatic branches of Christianity. Its followers believe that faith has the power to heal, and that baptism in the Holy Spirit grants special gifts, the ability to heal, to prophesy, to speak in unknown languages, and to inspire others. From an early age, Floridélis exhibited a strong faith. At church services, she would watch with fascination as congregants sang, danced, and spoke in unknown languages, forgetting about life's hardships. The girl herself loved to sing and often led prayer songs alongside the pastors. As a teenager, Floridélis began forming her own prayer groups. It was not enough for her just to preach to acquaintances, she believed she could reach and save far more people. This sense of mission and purpose became one of the key driving forces in her later life. The young woman boldly ventured into the most dangerous corners of the favelas, even speaking with well-known criminals, telling them about faith, redemption, and freedom through God. Remarkably, people actually listened to her. When Floridélis was only 14, her life changed drastically for the first time. Her father and brother died in a car accident, leaving her to live solely with her mother. The loss of her loved ones did not break her faith. On the contrary, Floridélis's spirituality grew even stronger. After some time, she convinced her mother to support her mission. Together, they rented a small shop where they sold sermons and religious materials to those Floridélis had brought to faith. Even then, it was clear that Floridélis was an exceptionally charismatic and passionate leader. Her words inspired people, and year by year, the number of her followers grew. Life, however, remained challenging. At the age of 20, Floridélis married a man about whom little is known. Over the years, the couple had 3 children, but by the time she was 30, her husband had already disappeared from her life. By day, she ran the daycare with her mother, and on weekends, she continued to serve her community. Over time, her sermons became more personal. The focus shifted to herself, her visions and messages, which Floridélis claimed came directly from God. Against the backdrop of rising crime in Rio's favelas, she felt the need to act directly. Together with her students, she ventured into the most dangerous neighborhoods, hoping to guide lost teenagers back to the light. Astonishingly, her methods worked. Even hardened criminals listened to her words. One story, which she later shared with her congregation, stood out in particular. According to her, one night she encountered one of the most notorious drug dealers in the neighborhood, accompanied by his bodyguards. They surrounded her, but Floridélis did not back down. She declared, "If my God wills it, He will turn you into lepers right now." According to her, after these words, the criminals silently backed off, and she left unharmed. This story strengthened her authority and drew even more followers. Rumors about her began to spread throughout the favelas. Many believed that Floridélis was not merely a pastor, but a true prophet sent to save lost children. She never denied these rumors. Soon, she opened a children's home, where she began taking in kids from the streets. At first glance, her actions seemed noble, but not all residents viewed them positively. The problem was that not all the children she took in were homeless or abandoned. She accepted any child who wanted to stay, while official guardianship was delayed for a long time. Nevertheless, among the children themselves, rumors circulated that living with Floridélis was almost like winning a lucky ticket. Many teenagers left their families to live in her home. For most residents and congregants, she remained a savior, a woman who rescued children from troubled environments, giving them stability and hope for the future. People sincerely believed that she possessed divine authority. By the time Floridélis began opening her home to neighborhood children, she was already in her 30s. The house was filled with children of various ages, including teenagers. One of them was 15-year-old Anderson do Carmo. Floridélis took him in during a difficult period, and soon he began dating her daughter, Simona. Gradually, Anderson became Floridélis's favorite, and over the years, their relationship grew increasingly close. By the age of 19, he was married to Floridélis. She always denied showing interest in him while he was underage, claiming that their relationship only began after he turned 18. Later, while preaching at Rio's Central Railway Station, Floridélis saw another opportunity to strengthen her reputation. the area around the station was often frequented by homeless people and unsupervised children. This became a new field for her work and a way to attract followers. In February 1994, Floridélis was delivering another sermon about salvation through faith when a woman approached her, wishing to confess. She admitted that she had just left her newborn child on the street and asked Floridélis to take care of him. Floridélis agreed. Together, they returned to the spot where the baby had been left, and he was indeed still there. She picked him up and took him home. A few days later, the woman returned, this time not alone, but with a group of women and children in need of help. There were 37 in total, including 14 infants. The woman explained that these children had become victims of a recent attack, in which corrupt police officers had killed their parents. Despite the apartment being tiny and barely having space, Floridélis and Anderson took all the children in. At first glance, it seemed like an extraordinary act of mercy, saving such a large number of children on the brink of hunger and death. The story quickly spread among the congregants and soon reached the media. Floridélis became a sensation. Journalists from across the country and even abroad called her, requesting interviews. However, popularity had a downside. Now famous, Floridélis faced a harsh reality. She simply lacked the resources to provide food, shelter, and care for such a large number of children. Food had to be sourced almost from the streets. The children often had to scavenge, including in trash bins. Moreover, none of the children were officially adopted. When this information came to light, Child Protection Services and city authorities raised alarms. Eventually, the court accused Floridélis of harboring minors and demanded her appearance for proceedings. Instead of complying, she made an unusual decision. She gathered the children and moved to another favela, just 25 minutes away from her previous location. At the new location, she was met by members of a local gang who wanted to understand why she had so many children with her. Floridélis once again relied on her charisma and persuasive skills. She told them her story, and to the surprise of many, the gang was moved by her actions. Members even approached the head of the local community association to help her secure housing. Nevertheless, the move did not solve all the problems. Public dissatisfaction continued to grow, and rumors about potential liability for child abduction spread throughout the city. Floridélis decided to publicly clarify the situation and announced a press conference. When the time came, she confidently took her place behind the podium and declared that she intended to meet with representatives of the United Nations and appear before the judge who had filed a case against her. Her words reassured many who had been following the story, and then something unexpected happened. Local officials who had previously condemned her actions began supporting Floridélis, seeing that public opinion was on her side. Soon, Floridélis gained national recognition, and her supporters began looking for ways to legalize her custody of the children. By that time, several more children had joined her, and in total, over 50 kids began calling her their mother. Support came quickly. Several businessmen gifted Floridélis a fully furnished house in the western part of Rio, where she could live with the children in more comfortable conditions. The spacious garage was particularly significant, and Floridélis and Anderson decided to convert it into a church. Around the same time, they began collecting tithes, the traditional practice of gathering a portion of congregants' income for the community. For followers of the Pentecostal movement, this was a common practice, and over time the church services began generating a stable income. The story of the children, which had previously caused negative attention, now worked in their favor. With the tithes, they were able to build their own place of worship on the grounds of an old abandoned bus depot. Thanks to Floridélis' reputation, the new congregation quickly attracted attention, with more than 5,000 people attending weekly services. Although Anderson's sermons were emotional and impressive, it was Floridélis' voice that touched the hearts of the congregation and inspired donations. Yet even with this flow of funds, it remained difficult to cover all the family's needs, so she opened a souvenir shop directly in the church, selling mugs with her image, quotes, and recordings of her songs. Striving for more, Floridélis released her first studio album in 1998. While it did not achieve commercial success, it made her visible in the media and diverted attention from her controversial past. In 2002, the host of one of Brazil's most popular television shows invited Floridélis to a Mother's Day special. She appeared with the children, and millions of viewers watched as the host presented her with the honorary title, Mother of the Nation. This title remained associated with Floridélis for many years. After her appearance on the show, politicians, TV hosts, and philanthropists began reaching out, eager to be close to a woman trusted by hundreds of children and thousands of congregants. One well-known director, having visited the favelas with Floridélis and captured impressive footage of her work, decided to create a biographical film. The project involved stars of local TV series, who waived their fees and directed them to help those in need. The film was titled Floridélis. One word is enough to change everything, and was shown at the 2009 International Film Festival in Rio. Although the film was commercially unsuccessful, it strengthened Floridélis' image as a media personality. Within a few months, she signed a contract with a major record label. Over the next 10 years, Floridélis released 5 music albums featuring songs about love, faith, and redemption. Some of these songs are still sung in Pentecostal churches across Brazil. In parallel with her music career, Floridélis actively expanded her religious activities. She opened 8 new branches of her church, which significantly increased income from tithes. As a result, having become pastors of 9 churches, Floridélis and Anderson were able to raise their standard of living. According to available data, their monthly income reached approximately $20,000, while the average salary of an ordinary Brazilian barely reached $500. Floridélis began wearing expensive clothing, traveling business class, and living in a guarded upscale neighborhood. But with success came a pace of life that many would have considered almost unbelievable. As early as 2004, she attempted to enter the Rio de Janeiro City Council but was unsuccessful. Once her fame solidified, Floridélis decided to try again. In 2016, she ran for mayor of one of the city's southwestern districts, yet again failing to secure enough votes. After this, she abandoned local politics and focused on more ambitious goals, at the level of the central government. In 2018, Floridélis ran for the Rio de Janeiro Chamber of Deputies. The campaign was intense. Sometimes she would speak 2, even 4 times a day. Her reputation played a decisive role, and after 4 months of hard work, she achieved a convincing victory. In February 2019, Floridélis officially took the oath of office, promising to serve society and declaring that she had achieved what she had never even dared to dream of before. From that moment, Floridélis assumed multiple roles at once: preacher, singer, mother of the nation, and now politician. She attended sessions, flew on private planes, and openly supported the then president of the country. However, her rise was short-lived. Soon, Floridélis was about to leave the loudest and most controversial mark in the history of modern Brazil. On June 15, 2019, an ordinary day began for Floridélis and Anderson. She was 58, he was 42. Despite the significant age difference, their marriage was considered ideal. But behind closed doors, things were more complicated. Anderson had long acted as her manager, controlling the operation of the churches, the upbringing of the children, and the family finances. He was a charismatic pastor, and many believed that with his growing influence came a large ego. Floridélis was irritated that she had to consult her husband even about spending her own money. However, divorce was not considered an option. In the Pentecostal church, it was frowned upon, and Floridélis wanted to maintain her reputation. To restore their lost closeness, she suggested a walk along the Copacabana waterfront with Anderson. To their surprise, it helped to reconcile their relationship. Around 2 a.m., Floridélis and Anderson were strolling along the shore after a snack from a street vendor. According to Floridélis, this walk really brought them closer. When they returned to the car, an intimate moment occurred between them. However, the calm of that night was shattered. On the way home, according to Floridélis, two motorcyclists began following them. Anderson noticed them and accelerated sharply, managing to get away and return home safely. Floridélis immediately went inside to check that the children were all right, while Anderson stayed outside to see if anyone was pursuing them. Suddenly, the night's silence was broken by a series of gunshots. Floridélis barely managed to enter the house when one of her adopted sons stopped her at the door, saying it was better not to see what was happening. It turned out that Anderson had been shot about 30 times, most of the wounds concentrated on the lower part of his body. Two of the sons rushed him to the hospital, but it was impossible to save his life. In the morning, news of the attack made headlines. Initially, it was believed that the assassination attempt was politically motivated, and that the criminal's target was Floridélis herself. She organized an all-night vigil at one of her churches, dedicated to prayer and spiritual cleansing, while the police began their investigation. However, it soon became clear that the surveillance footage did not support the version of events Floridélis had presented. The motorcyclists did not appear on any cameras, and the indoor cameras only recorded the interior of the house, failing to capture the attack. 15 minutes before the incident, a taxi had pulled up to the house. One of her adopted sons got out, briefly entered the house, and then left. Initially, the police did not connect this to the tragedy, but discrepancies in the recordings raised suspicions. Investigators began checking all the residents of the house. Most of the legal violations they found had been committed recently, just a few months prior to the tragedy. This cast doubt on the image of the family that Floridélis had so carefully cultivated. Soon, the police questioned a young man named Lucas, one of Floridélis' adopted sons whom she had taken in from the streets. Checks revealed that he had an outstanding warrant for drug trafficking. Lucas admitted that that night he had come home to hide a stash before going to a nightclub. Under pressure, he began recounting events leading up to the tragedy, including the purchase of a firearm for another of Floridélis' adopted sons, Flavio. Shortly after the tragedy, Flavio was declared wanted and was apprehended just 36 hours later. While in custody, he confessed to his involvement in the attack on Anderson. Nevertheless, the investigation continued. The police were convinced that there was more to the story. Investigators questioned all of Floridélis' adopted children. Their testimonies literally turned the investigation upside down, revealing a dark side of the woman previously hailed as the mother of the nation. Although Floridélis had always presented herself as a caring mother, the children described her differently. The household had a strict hierarchy. The younger children were assigned to the older ones, and Floridélis herself rarely interacted directly with the children. Her guidance was based on the belief that the children had to protect her from any threats. She gave many of them new biblical names and demanded that they regard her not just as a mother, but as a spiritual ideal. Some children did not come from homeless families but left their homes, drawn by Floridélis' image. She forbade contact with biological parents, claiming they were no longer needed. On social media, Floridélis cultivated the image of an ideal mother and servant of God, while behind the scenes at home, strict spiritual practices were enforced, children were made to pray for days, and the disobedient could be locked up for 21 days, for purification. When asked about the biblical basis for such methods, she would respond that it was the Lord's command. The interrogations revealed that the plot against Anderson had begun a year before the tragedy. Several children had attempted to poison him, and the man had been hospitalized 6 times, surviving each time by a miracle. According to the children, the instructions came from Floridélis herself. Over time, she grew increasingly irritable and resentful, particularly frustrated that Anderson controlled the family's finances and managed her schedule. Initially, she had counted on his support, but over time Anderson became an increasingly prominent figure, drawing more attention than she did. Floridélis decided to regain control and mobilized her children, whom she called God's messengers, to act in her interests. During interrogation, Floridélis denied any direct involvement in the attack, claiming that she loved Anderson and did not wish him harm. However, her account sharply conflicted with the children's testimonies, who reported that Floridélis had repeatedly said that Anderson had to die, and after failed poisoning attempts, she even directly stated, "We'll have to shoot him." Investigators also considered motives of personal interest. Shortly before the attack, Floridélis had a new man in her life, one of her adopted sons, Luciano, whom she considered her favorite and a potential replacement for Anderson, not only personally but also as an ally. Within the first 6 days after Anderson's death, the police arrested 6 more of the couple's adopted children, gradually uncovering the full picture of the tragic events. Arresting Floridélis herself proved far more complicated. Thanks to her position as a congresswoman, she had parliamentary immunity. Nevertheless, the media covered her case extensively, and many of her followers ultimately turned away. About 6 months after the attack on Anderson, her religious empire began to collapse. All but one of her churches were forced to close, and fewer than 100 people attended her sermons. Despite this, Floridélis continued to maintain her social media presence, posting about her pain and grief after her husband's death. Yet her greatest trial was still ahead. In 2021, Parliament voted to strip her of her congressional mandate, which automatically meant the loss of political immunity that had previously protected her from criminal prosecution. The day after losing her immunity, Floridélis posted a message claiming she was being arrested for something she had not done. Soon after, however, she was officially charged with murder with aggravating circumstances and taken into custody. In November 2022, the court found Floridélis guilty of orchestrating the murder, ordered through her own adopted son. She was sentenced to 50 years and 28 days in prison. Flavio, the direct executor of the crime, received 33 years. Lucas, who had helped procure the weapon, was sentenced to 7 years, and the other adopted children whose involvement was confirmed received lesser sentences. Thus ended the story of Floridélis dos Santos de Souza, a once respected preacher, singer, politician, and mother of the nation, who chose the path of murder over divorce. For a long time, she considered herself untouchable, but, as so often happens, life eventually set things straight.